They searched Elena Ruiz in front of 300 guests because a diamond bracelet had vanished from the Mafia bride's dressing room. The curvy transfusion nurse stood beneath the ballroom lights, her plum gown torn and a sealed blood bag in her hand. Vivienne Hale called her a thief who invented an emergency to get close to Marco Bellandi. Elena knew the girl carried a rare blood type, and she knew the bag requested for her emergency surgery should have been inside the hospital cooler across the room. Instead, its release tag was tied around Vivienne's missing bracelet. If Elena broke the seal, she could save a child but destroy the only proof that someone inside the Bellandi Medical Trust was selecting who lived long enough to inherit. If she protected the evidence, the girl might die before an ambulance cleared the estate gates. Elena looked at the man who had once called her only the night nurse and made him choose your family's blood or your family's secret. The ballroom stopped breathing before Marco Bellandi answered. His niece, Lucia, lay motionless beside a tower of champagne glasses, one hand pressed beneath her ribs. Guests backed away from the spreading red stain on her ivory dress. Vivienne remained on the raised engagement platform, still wearing the serene expression prepared for photographers. Elena set the blood bag on a clean silver tray and crossed to Lucia. "Call emergency services and tell them she has active bleeding," she said. Marco's security chief reached for his phone. "Open the east gates and send someone to guide the ambulance from the road." Elena checked Lucia's breathing pulse, skin temperature, and response without pretending she could diagnose the source on a ballroom floor. Lucia opened her eyes briefly. "It hurts," she whispered. "I know, sweetheart. Do not sit up." Marco knelt opposite Elena, his black suit sharp against the broken glass. What does she need? A trauma team imaging, surgical assessment, and blood available before she reaches the operating room. "You brought blood. I brought a compromised unit that cannot be transfused until its identity and handling are verified." His eyes moved toward the bag. "You said it was requested for her." The release tag carries Lucia's emergency profile, but the bag label carries a different patient number. That mismatch was why Elena had left St. Catherine Medical Center and driven to the Bellandi estate without waiting for permission. 40 minutes earlier, the blood bank system had released 2 rare negative units under Lucia's standing emergency protocol. Lucia had not been admitted, scheduled for surgery, or reported injured. Elena called the family number listed in the file and reached a disconnected line. Her supervisor told her to log the anomaly and finish her shift. Elena knew rare units could disappear within minutes, once released to a private courier. She followed the documented destination to the engagement celebration because invisible systems failed when everyone assumed another person would intervene. At the estate entrance, guards refused to call Marco and searched her vehicle. Vivienne appeared before security finished and accused Elena of using patient information to crash the party. Then the diamond bracelet supposedly vanished. Security found its empty velvet case inside Elena's coat pocket. Someone had planted it while tearing the coat from her shoulders. Elena had survived by holding onto the blood bag and repeating one fact. This unit was released under Lucia Bellandi's identity. Vivienne called Lucia forward to prove she was healthy. The girl crossed the dance floor, took 3 steps, and collapsed. Now Elena placed folded linen beneath Lucia's head and monitored the weakening pulse at her wrist. Marco removed his jacket and laid it over his niece without touching Elena. "Can the bag help her?" he asked. "Not safely in this room and not while the labels conflict." "Then why bring it?" "Because the release tag proves someone activated her emergency protocol before she collapsed." Marco looked up at Vivienne. For the first time that evening, the bride's composure showed a fracture. "This is grotesque," Vivienne said. "Lucia has complained of pain for days, and this nurse exploited it." Elena turned toward her. "How did you know the pain lasted days?" Lucia had told Elena only that it hurt now. Marco's gaze sharpened. Vivienne descended from the platform with wounded dignity. "She told me privately." "Then why was no physician called?" Elena asked. "Because she is a dramatic child, terrified of losing attention after our wedding." Marco rose slowly. "Do not speak about my niece that way." Vivienne adjusted her veil. "You are allowing a stranger to turn a family emergency into an accusation." Marco looked at Elena, as if measuring her usefulness against the scandal she created. He had seen her once before in St. Catherine's private recovery wing. His wounded cousin required repeated transfusions after surgery, and Elena stopped a rushed unit when the bedside identification did not match. Marco complained that she was delaying treatment. Elena explained the verification twice before asking him to leave the clinical area. "The ambulance is 6 minutes away," the security chief reported. Elena checked Lucia again. The pulse was faster, the skin paler, and the pain spreading toward her shoulder. "She may be bleeding internally," Elena said. "We keep her still and give responders a clear path." One of Vivian's private physicians pushed through the crowd carrying a black medical case. "Doctor." Adrian Vale directed the Bellandi Blood Foundation and had approved the release Elena challenged. "Move away from the patient," Vale ordered. "I will take responsibility." Elena did not move until she saw his identification, and Marco confirmed he was Lucia's physician. Vale reached for the compromised blood bag before examining Lucia. Elena shifted the tray beyond his hand. "The unit remains under disputed custody. You removed it from my hospital without authorization. I intercepted it from a private courier after its patient identifiers conflicted." Vale's jaw tightened. He opened his case and prepared an injection. Elena asked what he intended to administer. "Something for pain. Her blood pressure is unstable and the ambulance is almost here. You are a transfusion nurse, not a physician." "Correct, which is why I am asking you to name the medication before giving it." Vale refused. Marco stepped between him and Lucia. "Answer her." Sirens sounded beyond the windows. Vale closed the case. As paramedics entered, Elena gave a concise handoff and surrendered patient care without resistance. The lead paramedic examined the blood bag, documented both labels, and placed it inside a sealed cooler as possible evidence. When they lifted Lucia onto the stretcher, a white paper strip fell from the velvet bracelet case in Elena's pocket. It was the missing release tag from the second rare negative unit. Printed beneath Lucia's name was a time 12 minutes in the future. The future timestamp transformed Lucia's collapse from a medical emergency into a scheduled event. Lieutenant Naomi Brooks arrived before the ambulance left the estate. She supervised financial crimes cases involving hospital trusts and understood why a blood product could also be evidence. Elena handed her the paper strip by its edges and explained where it had fallen. Vivian immediately claimed Elena planted it inside the bracelet case. Brooks asked why the case had been placed in Elena's coat before security searched her. Vivienne said she had no idea. The guard who found it looked toward the floor. Marco noticed. "Who gave you the coat?" he asked. The guard admitted. Vivienne's assistant carried it from the dressing room. The humiliation had not been an impulsive response to missing jewelry. Someone had prepared the accusation before Elena entered the ballroom. Marco ordered the estate gates locked. Brooks corrected him. "You can secure your property, but no one is detained without legal grounds." Marco was not accustomed to having power defined in his own home. He accepted the correction because Lucia's ambulance was disappearing down the drive. Elena followed in a police vehicle after Brooks documented her as a clinical witness. At St. Catherine, the trauma team found internal bleeding requiring immediate surgery. The cause remained uncertain, and Elena refused to speculate outside her specialty. The hospital possessed no compatible rare negative units because both reserved bags had been released before Lucia arrived. One was the mislabeled unit secured by paramedics. The second was missing. Regional blood centers began an emergency search, while surgeons stabilized Lucia through other appropriate measures. Marco offered money, aircraft, and armed couriers. Elena told him none of those replaced a verified unit. "Blood is not a luxury item you can purchase from the fastest stranger," she said. "It must be compatible, traceable, and handled correctly. Then trace it. I have been suspended from the blood bank." Vale had filed the suspension while Elena traveled to the estate. He accused her of stealing protected material and abandoning her post. Hospital security collected her badge at the emergency entrance in front of Marco and the nursing staff. Elena signed the property receipt and requested the allegations in writing. She did not ask Marco to intervene. He intervened anyway. "Restore her access," he told the administrator. Elena faced him. "No." His expression cooled. "Your access is required to find the unit. Access granted by your pressure will let Vale claim I altered the system." "Then, what do you propose?" "An independent blood bank supervisor performs the search while I explain what to preserve." Brooks arranged for Grace Patel, the regional transfusion director, to take temporary control. Elena remained outside the secured laboratory and described the relevant records. Every release created a request compatibility, check packer, identity, courier, signature, temperature record, and bedside destination. Patel found Lucia's emergency profile activated at 6:42 p.m. Dr. Vale approved both units 30 seconds later. The system showed Elena packing them, even though hallway video placed her with another patient at that time. Her credentials had been copied. The first courier signature belonged to a contractor who delivered the bag to the Bellandi estate. The second signature belonged to Marco's security chief, Dominic Shaw. Shaw stood outside the operating room with the family. When Brooks questioned him, he denied entering the hospital that evening. Marco asked whether someone could forge the signature. Elena pointed to the future-dated release tag. A person with template access could print convincing paperwork in advance. The physical tag still carries a microscopic batch pattern created when the roll is manufactured. Patel confirmed that both recovered tags came from a roll assigned to Vale's foundation office, not the hospital blood bank. The main proof was no longer just a mismatched label. It demonstrated that someone outside ordinary clinical custody manufactured release evidence under Lucia's identity. Vale tried to leave through the physician garage. Brooks stopped him for questioning but lacked grounds to arrest him. He claimed the Foundation stored spare tags for disaster exercises. He also said Vivian personally requested Lucia's emergency protocol after the girl complained of abdominal pain. Vivian denied making the request. Each blamed the other while Lucia remained in surgery. At 1106, the regional center located one compatible unit at a hospital 40 miles away. The verified courier would need nearly an hour. Elena asked Patel to check whether Lucia had ever authorized directed donors. The file listed Marco as a potential compatible relative. He volunteered before testing was explained. Elena reminded him that willingness did not determine compatibility or immediate use. The laboratory evaluated him through standard procedure. He matched the rare profile, but processing still required time. While staff collected the donation, Marco watched Elena through the glass partition. "You knew what everyone needed before they asked," he said when she stepped into the corridor. "That is my job. Your hospital describes your job as handling inventory. My hospital notices inventory because it does not notice the people preventing shortages, errors, and panic." He looked toward the operating room doors. "I noticed. Too late." That admission was the first movement beyond seeing her as an obstacle. It did not restore her position or clear her name. Brooks returned with security footage from the Foundation office. At 6:31 p.m., Vivienne entered carrying the diamond bracelet and an empty velvet case. At 6:39, the cameras stopped recording. At 6:42, Lucia's blood profile activated. At 6:50, Vivienne appeared at the estate and announced her bracelet was missing. Then, Shaw's phone connected to the hospital guest network. A message appeared from an unknown sender. "The Bellandi donor is ready." Before Brooks could secure the device, every light in the surgical wing went dark. Emergency power restored the surgical lights within seconds, but the blood bank corridor remained dark. Patel activated the laboratory's independent backup, while Brooks ordered officers to secure every exit. Elena knew refrigerators had local alarms and reserve power, yet darkness created confusion around movement and custody. She remained where cameras could record her rather than rushing toward the unit everyone expected her to protect. Marco emerged from the donation room with gauze taped over his arm. "Lucia?" he asked. "The operating room retained power," Elena said. "The disruption appears limited to support systems." A nurse reported that the cooler containing Marco's newly collected donation had disappeared during the outage. It had not completed processing and could not yet be used for Lucia. Whoever took it wanted the Bellandi blood itself, not an immediately transfusible product. Marco's security men began searching staff carts until Brooks stopped them. "No private searches of hospital employees," she said. Elena supported the boundary, even while the missing blood threatened Lucia. Patel checked the cooler's electronic tracker. Its signal traveled down a service elevator toward the Foundation offices. Brooks took 2 hospital officers and followed it. Marco tried to join them. Elena stepped into his path. "If the message called you the donor, they may be drawing you away from the protected floor. You expect me to wait? I expect you to decide whether control matters more than Lucia's safety." He remained. 10 minutes later, Brooks found the cooler abandoned in Vale's locked conference room. The donation was still sealed, but its paperwork had been replaced with a label naming an unidentified male patient. Inside a cabinet, officers found 20 historical blood release tags from Bellandi relatives and senior employees. Several corresponded to medical crises, followed by changes in Foundation voting authority. Elena recognized the architecture of exploitation. The conspirators were using emergency blood profiles to predict stage or document moments when powerful patients became unavailable. Medical necessity created private access. Private access created signatures, proxies, and fear. The blood itself might also support fraudulent identity claims, but Elena would not assert that before forensic review. Vale insisted the cabinet predated his appointment. Vivienne claimed the Foundation's former director created it. The former director had died 18 months earlier after receiving an emergency transfusion arranged through the same office. It was a system failure built inside a charitable trust and protected by the Bellandi habit of avoiding public oversight. The surgery continued while the verified regional unit approached under police escort. Elena sat with Marco and Lucia's mother, Rosa, outside the operating room. Rosa had spent years allowing Marco to handle family threats because resistance seemed more dangerous than dependence. She admitted Vivienne had pressured her to transfer Lucia's medical authority after the wedding. Vivienne argued that Rosa's anxiety made her unreliable. The engagement agreement gave Vivienne temporary control of the family health trust if Marco or Lucia became incapacitated. Lucia would inherit the deciding trust vote on her 18th birthday in 11 days. The deadline made the planned collapse legible. If Lucia died or remained incapacitated, Vivienne gained the vote through Marco's marriage. If Marco became a donor patient inside the same hidden system, the entire trust could transfer before anyone audited the Foundation. Rosa blamed herself for staying silent. Elena did not offer empty absolution. "You can tell the truth now and document every request she made," she said. Rosa agreed to give Brooks a statement. The regional blood unit arrived at 1218 a.m. Patel verified it through 2 independent staff members before releasing it to the operating room. At 1:03, the surgeon reported that Lucia had survived the procedure and was stable enough for intensive monitoring. The hallway exhaled. Marco closed his eyes and placed one hand against the wall. Elena did not touch him. When he looked at her, she asked, "Would contact help?" He nodded. She rested her hand briefly over his bandaged forearm, away from the collection site. Marco turned his palm beneath hers, but Elena withdrew when Vale approached with hospital counsel. Counsel delivered formal notice that Elena's nursing privileges were suspended pending investigation. Vale demanded the return of every record she possessed. Elena signed acknowledgement without surrendering her private notes, which Brooks had already copied under legal authority. "You will never work in transfusion medicine again," Vale said. "That decision belongs to the licensing board, not you." His threat revealed how completely he mistook institutional access for permanent power. Marco offered Elena a position inside the Bellandi household with triple her salary. She refused before he finished describing it. "I am not becoming a private servant because your hospital punished me. I am trying to protect you. Protection without authority leaves me dependent on your mood." He had no answer. Elena's phone displayed an email from the Northeast Blood Alliance. 3 months earlier, she had applied for a regional quality director position and assumed the interview had gone nowhere. The alliance now offered her the job after an independent reviewer learned she had flagged the Bellandi discrepancy. The position included relocation to Providence Supervisory Authority and a salary large enough to support her mother without overtime. She had until noon to accept. Marco read nothing on the screen, but he saw choice settle in her face. "You have somewhere else to go," he said. "Yes. Will you? Unless this hospital clears my access and creates independent oversight, I leave tomorrow." He did not offer money again. "What would make you stay until Lucia wakes? Nothing you can purchase." Elena walked toward the exit to collect clothes from her apartment and prepare for Providence. At the elevator, Lucia's recovery monitor sounded an alarm. Vale's private physician badge had just opened the intensive care medication room. Vale was still standing 20 feet behind Elena. Someone else was using his identity. Elena called the intensive care desk instead of running blindly toward the alarm. She identified herself, reported the unauthorized badge event, and asked staff to secure Lucia's room through ordinary emergency procedure. Marco's men moved toward the elevators. Brooks ordered them back and sent uniformed officers with hospital security. The copied badge opened the medication room, but failed at Lucia's bedside door because her nurse had activated a clinical lockdown. The intruder abandoned a white coat in the stairwell and disappeared among guests evacuating from the earlier power fault. Inside the coat, officers found an empty bracelet case, identical to the one planted on Elena. Someone intended investigators to keep finding evidence that pointed toward a seductive outsider stealing from wealthy patients. Elena's appearance, tattoo, and brief prior encounters with Marco supplied the story. The conspirators expected status prejudice to complete what forged records began. Brooks requested every camera angle from the engagement search. One recording showed Vivian's assistant slipping the velvet case into Elena's coat while guards held her arms away from her body. The assistant, Claire Dunn, had vanished after Lucia's collapse. Her personnel file listed a former job at the Bellandi Blood Foundation under Dr. Vale. Vale denied remembering her. Elena found that improbable because Claire had used his copied credentials with precision. Vale could be directing her or could have lost control of a system he helped build. Either possibility required evidence. At 3:40 a.m., Lucia regained consciousness. Rosa entered first, followed by the intensive care physician. Lucia asked for Elena before she asked for Marco. Hospital counsel objected because Elena was suspended. The physician allowed a 5-minute patient-requested visit with a staff nurse present. Elena stood where Lucia could see her without approaching the bed. "You are safe, and your mother is here," she said. Lucia's voice remained weak. Vivienne said the pain would stop after the party. Elena did not lead the child toward an accusation. "Tell me what happened in your own words." For 3 weeks, Vivienne had given Lucia Foundation-branded supplements and insisted they would calm her stomach before the wedding. Lucia stopped taking them after the pain worsened. That evening, Claire found the unopened packet in Lucia's room and became angry. Lucia saw Claire exchange it for another packet before bringing her downstairs. The clinical team secured the remaining material for testing without discussing methods or assumptions in front of her. Lucia also revealed that Vivienne repeatedly asked her to sign a birthday health plan. She refused, because the document transferred emergency decisions to the Foundation board. When Lucia, tired Elena, ended the conversation even though Brooks had more questions. Patient welfare came before the investigation's convenience. Outside the room, Marco waited beside a window overlooking the sleeping city. "She trusted you because you did not tell her what to say," he said. "Children recognize when adults need a specific answer. I needed her to say Vivienne did it. Then you were not the right person to question her." Marco accepted the criticism. He admitted that he had ignored Lucia's resistance because the engagement promised stability for the trust. Vivienne came from a respected hospital family, understood donors, and appeared capable of modernizing the foundation. He had priced elegance and status above the concerns of nurses, clerks, and a frightened girl. "I selected the woman who almost killed my niece," he said. "You selected a system that never required her to answer to the people doing the work." Elena would not simplify the failure into one bad romantic choice. Marco asked what the blood release tag proved beyond unauthorized printing. She explained its dual function. The tag's batch pattern and future timestamp traced the manufactured emergency to the Foundation office. Its conflict with the physical bag demonstrated Elena's authority to detect that substitution before the planned crisis became irreversible. Without her professional comparison, every record would appear separately plausible. "So the ordinary strip in Brooks's evidence bag holds the whole scheme together," Marco said. "It holds the parts we can prove together." The distinction mattered. At 5:00 a.m., forensic testing found Lucia's remaining supplement packet had been tampered with. Clinicians believed it contributed to her bleeding, but the complete medical conclusion required further analysis. Brooks obtained warrants for Claire Vivienne Vale and Foundation records. Vivienne remained at the estate under attorney supervision and denied knowledge of the packets. Vale surrendered his passport but continued directing the Foundation through deputies. Marco wanted both removed immediately. Elena told him unilateral removal would allow their attorneys to argue that he destroyed governance records. He convened an emergency board session for noon and invited regulators, employee representatives, and press observers. Elena accepted the Providence job at 5:17 a.m. She showed Marco the confirmation before he could mistake her continued presence for dependence. "I leave after the board session," she said. "Why attend at all?" "Because Lucia's name was used to move blood, and every worker who questioned it has been threatened." "You are choosing them." "I am choosing the truth I already touched." Marco asked whether she would explain the evidence to the board. Elena agreed under 3 conditions. She would speak as an independent clinical witness, not as his employee or romantic interest. He would not interrupt, translate, or threaten anyone who challenged her. The board would hear from the blood bank technicians whose invisible labor preserved the trace. Marco accepted every condition. Before Elena left to change clothes, Patel called from the laboratory. The second missing unit had been located inside a Foundation display cooler scheduled for transport to the board meeting. Its patient label carried Marco Bellandi's name. Its release tag carried Lucia's future 18th birthday date. The second unit linked Lucia's coming birthday to a plan extending beyond the engagement night. Patel kept it inside the laboratory and documented every seal before police collected it. Its blood type matched neither Lucia nor Marco. The bag contained a common type that would have failed bedside compatibility checks if anyone attempted to use it under either identity. The conspirators were manufacturing records, not preparing legitimate treatment. Elena cautioned everyone against calling it an attempted transfusion until investigators established intended use. At 9:00 a.m., Claire Dunn was arrested at a private airfield carrying Foundation access cards and a flash drive. She requested counsel and made no statement. The drive was encrypted, and Brooks refused Marco's offer to have his technicians open it outside forensic procedure. Vivienne arrived at St. Catherine with 3 attorneys and a bruise darkening one cheek. She claimed Claire attacked her after acting alone. No witness confirmed the account. Vale appeared separately and presented records portraying Vivienne as the sole administrator of Lucia's emergency profile. The documents looked complete until Elena noticed every page used the same printer batch as the false release tags. Vale had submitted manufactured proof that carried the trace of its own origin. Brooks added the documents to the evidence chain. The board session moved from the Bellandi estate to St. Catherine's public auditorium so regulators and clinical staff could attend. Marco entered without his usual security procession. He sat beside Rosa and Lucia's empty chair rather than at the head table. Elena wore a structured charcoal suit borrowed from her sister and kept the plum dress, torn coat, and tattooed humiliation out of the board's preferred narrative. Her body had never been evidence of dishonesty. Vivienne's attorney opened by describing Elena as a disgruntled contractor with an inappropriate interest in Marco. He displayed photographs from the engagement search before showing a single medical record. Elena waited until the board chair invited her to speak. "If my dress determined blood compatibility, your argument might be clinically relevant," she said. A few technicians in the rear seats smiled. "It does not." She explained Lucia's standing rare blood profile, the unexplained activation, and the 2 releases generated before any documented emergency. Patel displayed the tags in sealed sleeves. Elena showed how their batch pattern belonged to the foundation roll, and how one printed a time that had not yet occurred. The bag labels conflicted with the tags, proving the paperwork had been prepared independently of legitimate compatibility processing. The first false tag was tied to Vivienne's bracelet case, connecting the medical scheme to Elena's staged humiliation. The second used Lucia's 18th birthday, connecting it to the trust deadline. Vivienne interrupted. She could have printed every one of them. The board chair asked Elena to answer. "The system shows my credentials were used while video places me with another patient," Elena said. "That does not prove who copied them, but it proves the electronic name alone is unreliable." She refused to claim more. Patel then testified that Elena had raised the discrepancy before Lucia collapsed and before anyone outside the foundation could know a medical crisis was planned. That timing destroyed the claim that Elena invented the evidence afterward. Vale's attorney blamed Claire. Elena asked why a former assistant retained active access to his office printer roll, emergency profiles, and physician credentials. Vale, said the foundation, suffered administrative weakness. That weakness transferred rare blood under a child's name and removed the nurse who stopped it, Elena replied. A failure that consistently benefits authority is not neutral. Marco remained silent as promised. His restraint allowed Elena's status to change through her own competence. The board prepared to suspend Vale and Vivienne when every display screen in the auditorium changed. A video showed Marco meeting Elena outside Lucia's room during the night. The angle made their brief permission-based hand contact appear intimate. An edited audio track suggested Marco promised Elena control of the hospital if she destroyed Vivienne. The room erupted. Elena recognized the original location of the camera inside a family consultation room. Only hospital security and foundation legal staff could access it. It was a counteraction designed to invalidate the public reversal while it occurred. Marco's attorneys urged him to clear the room and seize the servers. He looked toward Elena. She shook her head. Let independent technicians preserve the broadcast source before anyone touches it. The board chair suspended the presentation for 20 minutes while regulators isolated the system. Vivienne approached Elena in the corridor. They will always believe a woman like you wanted him, she whispered. Elena met Herrgase. Wanting a man would not make my evidence false, but it makes you ordinary. I was never asking to be exceptional. I was asking you to stop using a child's blood as paperwork. Vivienne's smile disappeared. Lucia was never supposed to bleed that much. Brooks stood behind her, with a body camera running. How much was she supposed to bleed? The lieutenant asked. Vivienne turned and saw the recording light. Her attorney pulled her away before she answered. The admission established knowledge of planned harm, but still left Vale and Claire's roles unresolved. Regulators traced the manipulated video to the Foundation legal server. Vale possessed administrator access. Vivienne knew the consultation room's location. Claire carried the likely editing archive. The structure required all three. Then an intensive care nurse entered the auditorium and handed Rosa a folded note. Lucia had developed a new complication, and her verified rare blood reserve was missing from the locked refrigerator. The serial number on the empty shelf matched the bag sealed on the evidence table in front of Elena. The matching serial number suggested the evidence bag was Lucia's legitimate reserve, but Elena refused the apparent conclusion. Serial numbers could be copied, just as credentials had been copied. Patel checked the sealed unit against the blood center's independent shipping record. Its donation code belonged to a different hospital and could not be Lucia's verified reserve. Someone had duplicated the visible serial number to make police evidence appear medically necessary. The real unit remained missing. Lucia's team had other treatment options, but her rare negative reserve mattered if the bleeding returned. Elena asked the intensive care nurse who last verified the refrigerator. The answer was Marcus Lee, a night technician suspended 6 months earlier after challenging Foundation release practices. His name had been reactivated for 1 shift without his knowledge. Elena requested a physical inventory of every transport cooler rather than another database search. Staff found an unlogged cooler beneath the auditorium stage, where Foundation exhibits had been delivered. Its tracker had been removed, but the temperature indicator remained within the acceptable handling range. Inside was Lucia's genuine reserve, with intact blood center seals. Patel and a second supervisor verified it before releasing it to intensive care. Lucia stabilized without requiring the unit, and the clinical team kept it available. She understood how people, objects, and records had to agree before a life-saving product became trustworthy. Brooks reviewed delivery footage and saw Dominic Shaw place the cooler beneath the stage. Marco's security chief had denied visiting the hospital during the first release. He now claimed Vivian ordered him to move the unit for safekeeping. Vivian denied speaking with him. Shaw's phone contained messages from AV, directing both the courier signature and stage delivery. Dr. Adrian Vale said the initials belonged to an administrative vendor. The vendor did not exist. Brooks detained Shaw and Vale while forensic staff preserved their devices. Elena did not allow the dramatic discovery to obscure the unresolved harm. Lucia remained a patient, not a prop, for the Bellandi family's redemption. Rosa read her statement describing pressure to transfer medical authority before Lucia's birthday. 2 blood bank technicians described warnings Vale ignored during earlier suspicious releases. Marcus Lee joined by video and showed the retaliation that ended his career at St. Catherine. They became witnesses to the system they had kept functioning despite those above them. The board suspended Vale and Vivienne from all Foundation authority pending investigation. It also voted to place the blood program under temporary independent control. Marco could have ended the session there with his family vote preserved. Instead, he asked to speak about his own responsibility. He admitted pressuring clinicians for speed, allowing private security to cross professional boundaries, and treating Elena's earlier verification hold as personal defiance. A culture built around my convenience taught people that stopping me was more dangerous than risking a patient, he said. That culture nearly killed Lucia. He surrendered the Bellandi family's unilateral appointment power over the Foundation before knowing whether Elena would remain. Elena received a second message from Providence, confirming a car would collect her at 400p. She had completed her testimony. Lucia was stable, the genuine reserve was safe, and regulators controlled the records. Her chosen exit no longer threatened anyone. She said goodbye to Patel and the technicians who had worked beside her. Marco met her at the elevator but did not block it. "I was told Claire has escaped custody during transfer," he said. Elena's hand paused above the button. Brooks confirmed that a false medical emergency diverted the officers escorting Claire from the airfield. Claire stole a hospital vehicle and took the encrypted flash drive. Investigators believed she was heading toward the Bellandi Blood Foundation's off-site archive. The archive contained historical donor identities, emergency profiles, and records of the 2 unexplained deaths. Marco asked Elena what Claire could destroy there. "The history that proves this happened before Lucia," Elena said. "The current case can survive through the release tags and independent records. Then you can leave." His answer surprised her. He offered a police escort to Providence and promised not to make her responsible for saving his institution again. He was finally respecting the freedom she had fought to establish. Elena stepped into the elevator. Before the doors closed, Patel called her phone. The off-site archive also stored emergency blood for 42 clinic patients with complex compatibility needs. If Claire destroyed temperature controls or identification records, innocent people would lose carefully matched reserves. The crisis extended beyond Bellandi's succession. Elena pressed the door-open button. "I am not staying for Marco's Foundation," she told Brooks. I am staying for 42 patients whose names Claire intends to erase. She called Providence and requested a 24-hour delay. The Alliance granted it without withdrawing the offer. Her freedom exit remained available. Elena set conditions before assisting. Police would control the site. Patel would hold clinical command, and Marco's security team would remain outside unless law enforcement requested help. No one would remove blood products until 2 independent identifiers were established. Marco agreed without negotiation. The archive occupied a former champagne warehouse beneath the Riverfront Foundation offices. Its backup system had already sent a temperature warning. Brooks approached with police while Patel monitored storage remotely. Elena reviewed the paper disaster map because Claire could manipulate digital directions. The map showed one manual isolation valve capable of protecting the patient's storage room from a building-wide shutdown. Only a trained blood bank worker would recognize which room mattered first. As officers entered, a live message appeared across the Foundation screens. Claire stood inside the archive, holding the original roll used to print the false release tags. "Bring me Elena Ruiz," she said, "or every Bellandi secret thaws with the blood." Brooks refused Claire's demand for direct access to Elena. Elena agreed with the decision. The live feed showed no other person inside the archive, but police could not confirm every room. Claire had locked the patient's storage chamber and disabled its automated cooling. Patel estimated they had less than 30 minutes before some units required quarantine and review. Elena studied the disaster map and identified a service shaft connecting the warehouse mechanical room to the storage controls. Police sent a trained officer through it, while Brooks kept Claire talking. Claire accused Elena of ruining a plan intended to free the Foundation from Marco's violent family. She claimed Vivienne wanted public respectability and Vale wanted research influence. Lucia's incapacitation would transfer the trust vote without killing her. Elena answered through the police negotiator's microphone. "You scheduled a child's medical collapse and stole blood from patients who may have no replacement. Calling it reform does not change the people you treated as inventory." Claire's composure broke. She insisted Marco's family deserved to lose everything. Elena agreed that family power required reform but refused the premise that innocent patients were acceptable leverage. The tactical officer reached the manual isolation valve and restored cooling to the patient's storage room. Patel watched the temperature stabilize. Claire saw the change on her panel and moved toward the archive shelves with an ignition device. Police breached the main door before she activated it. They arrested her without injury and recovered the original printer roll flash drive, copied badges, and Foundation ledgers. Elena entered only after the building was cleared, and Patel authorized clinical access. Together they inspected every reserve unit, quarantine marker, and temperature indicator. 3 bags required additional review because Claire had removed them from controlled shelves. The remaining patient products stayed protected. Inside Claire's work bag, Brooks found correspondence connecting Vivienne and Vale to the timing of Lucia's crisis. Vale designed the false emergency releases. Claire manufactured the tags and copied credentials. Vivienne staged the public accusation and pressured Lucia to surrender medical authority. Shaw moved products and manipulated security access. The main proof remained the release tag, because it was the first concrete object linking the manufactured emergency Foundation printer bracelet setup and birthday deadline. At sunset, Brooks escorted Elena back to St. Catherine for the final regulatory hearing. Lucia was awake enough to speak with her mother and asked whether the engagement party was over. Rosa told her the engagement was over permanently. Marco sat outside the room rather than assuming access. He had withdrawn from the Foundation vote to prevent his personal interest from controlling the outcome. "The patient reserves are safe," Elena told him. Relief crossed his face. "And you? Still going to Providence?" He nodded. "Then I owe you an apology that does not ask you to stay." He apologized for treating verification as delay for allowing guards to search and expose her for offering household employment instead of professional authority, and for assuming protection could substitute for consent. Elena accepted the truth of the apology without erasing its consequences. "What you do when I am gone will determine whether it means anything," she said. The regulatory hearing began in the same auditorium where the altered video had played. Vivienne, Vale, Claire, and Shaw appeared through separate secured feeds under legal representation. Brooks summarized the investigation without promising guilt before trial. She explained the original tag from the bracelet case in plain language. Its future time proved preparation before Lucia's collapse. Its batch pattern traced it to the Foundation office. Its patient identity conflicted with the physical bag. Its placement inside the planted theft evidence connected medical manipulation to the attack on Elena's credibility. Most importantly, Elena identified the conflict before the crisis, proving her authority arose from professional competence rather than romantic access to Marco. Marcus Lee's retaliation was entered into the official record. Patel presented the protected patient inventory and the safe recovery of Lucia's unit. When Vivienne's attorney again mentioned Elena's dress and tattoo, the regulator stopped him. "The witness's body is not a rebuttal to laboratory evidence," she said. The board terminated Vale's Foundation authority and referred his clinical conduct to the licensing body. Vivienne lost every position granted through the engagement agreement. Claire and Shaw remained subject to criminal proceedings and employment sanctions. St. Catherine reinstated Elena's privileges and offered her former contract. She declined it publicly. "Restoring the same role does not correct the power that made speaking dangerous," she said. The regulator asked what correction would be sufficient. Elena proposed an independent transfusion integrity office, reporting outside donor relations and family counsel. Its director would hold release stop authority, audit access, hiring power, and a voting seat on the Foundation board. Contract workers would gain protected reporting and independent appeals. No family member could activate an emergency profile without 2 clinical confirmations. The office could suspend any blood product movement when patient identity handling or authorization conflicted. Marco placed a signed trust amendment on the table. It surrendered the Bellandi family's unilateral veto and funded the office for 5 years under independent governance. He had signed it before hearing whether Elena would accept the position. The regulator offered her the directorship. Providence remained a better salary, cleaner reputation, and immediate escape. Elena requested until morning to decide. As the auditorium emptied, Marco waited without approaching. Vivienne passed between officers and looked back at Elena. "If you take that office, everyone will still say you slept your way into it," she said. Elena looked toward the technicians gathering their records. "Then they can say it while reporting to my audit." Elena spent the night beside Lucia's intensive care room while remaining outside the clinical team. Providence offered distance, established authority, and freedom from Bellandi history. St. Catherine offered damaged ground-resistant executives and the chance to build safeguards for workers who could not simply relocate. At dawn, Lucia asked whether Elena would attend her 18th birthday. "Only if your doctors approve cake and your mother invites me," Elena said. Lucia smiled. "Uncle Marco will invite you. Your uncle does not decide for every woman in the building." Marco heard the answer from the doorway and did not challenge it. Elena contacted the Northeast Blood Alliance before making her decision public. She explained the independent directorship and asked whether the Providence offer could become a collaborative audit partnership. At the morning board session, Elena accepted a 1-year term as independent director of transfusion integrity. The contract granted release stop authority, hiring and disciplinary input protected audit, access a foundation vote, and the unconditional right to refuse Bellandi family instructions. It also allowed her to resign without returning housing bonuses or protection because none formed part of the agreement. She selected Patel as external reviewer and invited Marcus Lee to apply for the restored quality position through an independent panel. Marco signed the final trust amendment and left the room before the board voted on her appointment. He refused to turn support into influence. Vivienne faced charges connected to the planned medical crisis, evidence fabrication, and conspiracy. Vale lost hospital privileges while the licensing authority reviewed his conduct. Claire and Shaw remained accountable for unauthorized access evidence manipulation and the archive incident. St. Catherine cleared Elena's suspension, corrected her employment record, and paid lost wages without requiring confidentiality. Elena made sure the statement credited the technicians who preserved the records. Her office replaced the Foundation's private donor suite beside the main blood bank. The glass walls carried no Bellandi crest. Every emergency release now required independent clinical confirmation and a physical digital reconciliation before departure. Workers could pause a transfer without requesting donor approval. Lucia recovered and celebrated her birthday in the hospital garden with a small family dinner. She kept her deciding trust vote and used it to add a patient advocate to the Foundation board. Rosa assumed control of her daughter's medical decisions until Lucia reached adulthood with independent guidance rather than family pressure. Marco attended as an uncle, not as the authority managing every chair. He brought Elena coffee and waited for her to accept it. "No sugar," he said. "You remembered. I am practicing attention before instruction." Marco attended board meetings where Elena overruled his preferred timelines. He disagreed, without threatening funding. When late shifts raised safety concerns, he asked what measures her staff wanted instead of placing guards outside her office. Elena selected improved parking access, shared escorts for all night workers, and no private surveillance. 3 months after the engagement, Marco requested an appointment with Elena during business hours. He entered her office only after she invited him. "I want to ask you to dinner," he said. "Not because you saved Lucia, not because you accepted this office, and not because I expect an answer today." Elena set down the release report she was reviewing. "What happens if I say no, I leave, keep every governance promise, and ask nothing again unless you reopen the subject? And if I say yes, dinner in a public restaurant, chosen by you, without security at the next table?" She considered the man who once tried to solve resistance by purchasing authority. He now offered a clear invitation with a consequence-free refusal. "One dinner," she said. "No assumptions afterward." "Agreed." He extended his hand halfway and waited. Elena completed the distance because consent lived in the space he no longer claimed. They continued slowly through scheduled dinners, public walks, and honest disagreements. Marco never asked Elena to leave her office for his household. Elena never confused his vulnerability with proof that he had changed. She measured change through the systems he respected when she was absent. At the end of her 1-year term, the external review found fewer release errors, faster reporting, and no retaliation cases hidden through donor counsel. The board made her office permanent and expanded its authority across every Bellandi-funded clinic. Elena accepted a renewed contract after negotiating additional seats for clinical workers. Marco did not participate in the vote. The engagement platform was gone, and the room hosted a fundraiser governed by the Independent Patient Board. Elena wore a deep plum dress by choice, her collarbone tattoo visible beneath the white lights. No one searched her, covered her, or converted her body into evidence against her work. Marco approached without a ring announcement or audience waiting for a performance. "May I have this dance?" he asked. Elena looked toward the blood bank technicians celebrating near the stage, and then back at him. "One dance," she said. "No assumptions afterward." His smile carried recognition rather than victory. Still agreed. The original release tag remained sealed in the court record, a thin strip of paper that proved a crisis had been scheduled before a child ever fell. It also proved that invisible labor becomes extraordinary power when a woman trusts what her profession has taught her to notice. Vivienne had tried to price Elena through desire, clothing, and status. The public record priced her through authority, judgment, and the system she rebuilt. Marco did not reward Elena with power. He surrendered the control that had prevented her from exercising it. She chose the work, chose the terms, and only then chose the man waiting for permission beside her.